I watched Bullet Train, and I didn't really enjoy my time in the cinema watching it. I saw the trailer of Bullet Train before watching Nope, and I was like, you know what, this looks like a fun movie. I haven't seen Brad Pitt do something fun in a while. He seems to be a bit more selective with his roles. I haven't seen him in a movie since Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I watched the trailer in the cinema when I went to see Nope, and me and my brother, we were laughing a lot during the trailer, and there was some salty white woman who was just like, ah, ah. She did that to us while we were laughing. So yeah, I really liked the trailer. It was a well put together trailer. You had that Japanese version of Staying Alive. It was funky, it was groovy, it looked fun. It looked like a fun, original motion picture. And then you have the director David Leitch, who is one of the directors who directed the first John Wick movie. The first John Wick movie was directed by two people. One of the directors went on to make John Wick 2 and John Wick 3, and the other director, David Leitch, who was the director of this film, went on to make Deadpool 2, which I really enjoyed Deadpool 2 actually, more so than Deadpool 1, just because of its unique visual style. But he also made Atomic Blonde, which I wasn't really into, and Hobbs and Shaw, which was, let's just chalk it up. It was a paycheck for the director. I won't give him too much of a hard time. If a studio went to me with a fucking $1 million and said, make our stupid Hobbs and Shaw movie, I'll fucking do it. I don't give a shit. Yeah, but it's actually interesting because as the John Wick franchise progressed with that singular director, it became less focused on the style and more so focused on the combat. And as David Leitch's career progressed, we kind of saw that he was a bit more of that stylistic person who was involved in the John Wick movies. So you had one half that was more of the action guy and the other half that was more of the style man. And together they made a really good movie in John Wick. Bullet Train is about Brad Pitt, and he needs to steal a briefcase from someone, and as he does so, everyone starts going on his tail. You have many characters in this. It's a very convoluted movie, but you got Brad Pitt. He's kind of this neurotic, kind of anxious character. He's a hitman, but he's always criticizing himself for being down on his luck. He was actually the best character in the movie, Brad Pitt. But other than that, you have Aaron Taylor Johnson and his twin. They call him a twin, but he doesn't really resemble him. That's the actor from The Eternals, which I've never seen The Eternals, and I think this is the first time I see this actor in a movie, but he did a really good job as well. I liked Aaron Taylor Johnson and his twin. They're the main antagonists of this. But other than that, you have a slew of characters that aren't really too interesting. You have a Japanese crime boss. You have this kid assassin. You have Zazie Beetz, who shows up in the movie. A man whose kid is dying and is on life support. You have a Mexican hitman who's out for revenge for his wife. You have kind of this slew of characters that are all on this bullet train. And while I was interested in the story that involved the twins and Brad Pitt, I wasn't really interested in every other character in this. This is a perfect example of a movie that's all style and no substance, in my opinion. And it doesn't even commit to one style, and that's the main problem I had with it. On the one hand, you have a very Tarantino, Guy Ritchie kind of movie with your flashy title cards and the long scenes of rambling about stuff that doesn't really progress the story. There's a whole bit in this movie where one of the twins really likes Thomas the Tank Engine, and that is reoccurring and reoccurring and recurring and recurring. They beat it to death in this fucking movie, that stupid Thomas the Train Engine joke. Tank Engine! Say what you will about Tarantino, he's a very flashy director and a lot of hipsters like to hate on him. But he's really selective with his music, and he's very selective with every single thing about his film. And while this movie does have those Guy Ritchie-isms and those Tarantino-isms, it's not as immaculate as a Tarantino movie. There are some parts where the style just becomes lazy. During fight sequences, where the music is basically just stock generic rock music, I was like, okay, what is this? If Black Keys was a ripoff of White Stripes, this is a ripoff of Black Keys. This is the ripoff of a ripoff of a ripoff of a ripoff. So like I said, it has that Guy Ritchie Tarantino style, like a Smoking Aces, or there's that movie recently that came out, Free Fire, with Brie Larson. Kind of has that style to it. There's an anime influence kind of going on as well, which I thought that was more interesting and I wish they would have committed to that style more so than the Guy Ritchie style. There's scenes where Brad Pitt and Zazie Beetz is confronting face to face, and they're just looking at each other, and I felt like I was watching a real life manga or an anime, because Zazie Beetz she kind of licked her chops and getting ready to fight, and the sound effect they used was very over the top, like a and they were like kind of slow-mo on it. It felt like I was watching an anime in parts, and I kind of wish the movie committed to that style rather than the Guy Ritchie Tarantino ripoff style. This movie takes place in Tokyo, takes place in Japan, but at no point did I feel like this needed to take place in Tokyo, other than a few cultural quirks that happen here and there, and a few side characters that are Japanese, which is a shame because John Wick is heavily influenced in Asian cinema. You would think that they would take advantage of the culture that brought the movies they were heavily influenced by, but it doesn't really play around with that culture all that much. So the style is all over the place. On the one hand, you have a very American style with the snappy dialogue. I felt like it was written by a film school student in California, but then on the other hand, you have that Japanese style that doesn't really come into fruition, and it just kind of... This is the most film school screenplay you'll ever see in your life. There's too much going on, too many characters, too many flashbacks, and it feels like a first draft was written, but the writer was so attached to what he did that he didn't want to cut anything out, and then you're left with a very long, unfocused movie with too many subplots, characters, flashbacks, etc. There's a whole running gag involving a water bottle that is played to death in this movie, and that's going to be a recurring theme. Everything is kind of played to death in this movie. They gave a backstory to a fucking water bottle, and I can just picture the person writing the script is like, oh yeah, wouldn't it be funny if we gave a fucking water bottle? That's so fucking quirky. And it just feels very Reddit. Other than the fact that there's too much going on in the screenplay, what is happening isn't all that interesting because there's so many cliches in this that I'm quite frankly tired of. One cliche that's really getting on my nerves by now, and it was started by the movie Kick-Ass. Kick-Ass had the character of Hit Girl, which kind of looked like this bubbly little kid, but in reality was a deadly assassin. And I kind of hate the smartass, wisecracking kid sidekick that looks all cute and girly on the outside, but on the inside she's an adult. It's one of the most tired and overplayed cliches I can think of, and it's really, really, really annoying me. So that basically is Joey King's character in this movie, I believe her name is. Her whole plot should have been cut out. It was not interesting. There's a twist at the end involving her. I didn't see it coming, but it was indeed out of lack of trying because I kind of lost interest in the movie by the time that happened. Too much going on the surface level, and once you dig a little deeper, it kind of is very simplistic and lazy. One of the John Wick movies, I think it was the second movie, opened with a Buster Keaton homage. There's a film being projected on a building, and it's an old Buster Keaton film. I don't know which one it was. I'm not a film snob. The reason why that played at the beginning of the movie is because John Wick has a certain simplicity to it. About a guy who... his house got trashed by mobsters, his dog died, he's out for revenge, and he'll do it by any means necessary. And there's these really great set pieces in the John Wick movies, especially John Wick 2 and 3. There's this whole part in the third movie that involves Halle Berry's dogs. There's this part where he's riding a horse. There's a part where he's using his car as a weapon. I can really point out some really interesting set pieces in the action sequences. But that doesn't really happen in this movie. The one action sequence that does really take advantage of its premise is the silent cart action sequence where these two people are fighting and they're trying not to cause a scene in the middle of a quiet cart of the bullet train. And that was really interesting, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. But that was in the trailer, and it doesn't really do anything with its bullet train premise other than that. Heavily reliant on the trope of they're fighting, someone walks in, they're like, I can't whistle, and then the person leaves, and then they go back to fighting. They do that thing about 4 or 5 times in this movie. One of the John Wick movies actually does that, but it was done very effectively. They're fighting, and it's this long, gratuitous fighting sequence, and they crash through a building, and it so happens to be the hotel where they have to be respectful in. So they're in the hotel and they're walking on eggshells. They go have a beer, have a drink of something, then they return to fighting. It really worked in the John Wick movies, but this movie, it's so heavily repetitive. Everything about it is very repetitive. The Thomas the Train Engine jokes are repetitive, or Tank Engine. The use of that fighting, stop fighting, that was repetitive. That water bottle joke was so, oh my god, just get it over with. We don't need this so many times. It is wasted potential, because I saw the trailer and I was like, hey, a movie that kind of has this Japanese flair to it. I wanted like just a straightforward action movie with a Japanese twang to it, and that's not at all what I got. It really wasted the idea of a bullet train. The movie opens and Sandra Bullock is talking into Brad Pitt's ear, and she's giving him advice. And she says, okay, there's 16 carts on this train, and you're introduced to a cart that has this kind of kitty theme, kind of this Hello Kitty vibe. And then you have another cart that has this quiet zone. She says there's 16 carts. I thought every cart would kind of have a different theme. Maybe like one cart was a bit more of a coffee shop, and people are there, and there's like a Starbucks or the Japanese equivalent of a Starbucks or something. And I thought maybe another cart would have a different theme, but it doesn't really do that. It kind of doesn't need to take place on a bullet train. It can take place on any train, other than the fact that there's a point where Aaron Taylor Johnson is on the train and it's zooming, and that kind of, you have to suspend your disbelief quite a bit for that. And there's a lot of that, because on the one hand it is trying to go for that Guy Ritchie gritty tone, but then on the other hand it has this very cartoony vibe to it. Style is all over the place, not much substance, a lot of wasted potential. Didn't like this movie. Don't go and watch it. Yeah, and it's a shame, because I was really thinking this movie was going to be good, but it just wasn't good. Alright, take care guys, I love you, and stick around.